Hello friends, and we continue our discussion of simultaneity and sequence, which is really an aspect of this series on adventures in identification, because the whole purpose of these rather abstract speculations is to increase our ability to identify as pure being whilst in the very midst of illusory presentations. We were just dealing with the idea that every specific measurable quantity in illusion, as all quantities are in illusion, is what I call a finite perceivable. I had mentioned the idea that perception finitizes, and it's only by being infinity, being, that no finitization occurs. Every finite quantity in illusion, whether a quantity of time or of space, an apparent quantity, I really should say, because all quantities are apparent, and in reality there is no real quantity. Yes, okay. Trying to get this all lined up here. So every finite quantity in illusion, because in reality there's no large or small, there's only what is, whether a quantity of time or of space is a specifiable and apparently measurable, or it's at least measurable in apparency, which is all that with which we are presented, or measurable in illusion. I mentioned the idea that Maya, one of its definitions is to measure that which is measurable. In fact, the great life is immeasurable. Absolute infinitude, or the utterly infinitudinous infinitude, as there are different varieties of infinity, is always immeasurable. So the immeasurable is the real, and if it can be measured, it's actual, and we must deal with it practically, because it is the condition of our consciousness which reveals something as measurable, our finite consciousness, which finitizes infinity and makes it measurable. But it's not real. The measurable is not real. So we're going on here, we're talking of points. And there are mathematical ideas about what a point is, and I'm interested in the mathematical, metaphysical idea of what a point may be. So a true point, as I said before, there's a difference between a dot on a page, which is really a huge structure in relativity. You know, there measurements are being taken of objects which are so utterly minute that a dot on a page is like a whole planet. If we say, well, it's a point, but it's not really. It's just a virtual point. I would say this, that every virtual point is measurable and not a real point, a true point. However, and this is one of the important ideas to be advanced here, or at least test it out. A true point, however, is strangely not a quantity, whether of time or of space. A true point cannot be quantified. A true point cannot be quantified. It is, it exists, but it cannot be quantified. In a way, can it even be located? Can a non-quantified entity be located? Be located or positioned in comparison with something that is quantified. A true point is not measurable because it has no dimension, whether of time or space. This is somehow so important, and it is the foundation of many conclusions which follow. A true point is not a quantity, whether time and space, and it is not measurable because only quantities in illusion are measurable. Only quantities in illusion are measurable. So this is of very great importance. We say when we extend a point, we create a line. A line, we do know, has length, though it has no other dimension. It's one-dimensional, at least the ideal line. When you draw something on paper or on a computer screen, of course, it does have width, and in some kind of micro sense, it probably has height as well. I wonder here, can a measurable line really be formed of true points when infinity times 0 equals 0? Well, maybe this is one of those. Perhaps this is an, as they call it, indeterminate form, meaning the result of the operation could be several things, several results. But anyway, any number times 0 is equal to 0 usually. And if there are 0 infinities, it's just 0. Because 0 negates. It negates the existence of. 0, in this sense, negates the existence of the thing or the quantity which is multiplied by it. There's just 0 of that thing. So if a point has no space, even if you assemble an infinitude of points, no dimension has been created because you are it is a kind of cipher that exists, it's a kind of non-dimensionality which exists. I think I may have put that down before. A true point is a kind of let's see. I like that. I'm going to make that into code word. And I like the idea of the non-dimensionality. It's a kind of a non-dimensionality which exists. It's a kind of non-dimensionality which exists, at least in illusion, because in pointlessness a true point does not exist, obviously. So here comes the definition, which is certainly in a way not a mathematical definition. It's as much a metaphysical definition as anything, that a true point is a non-temporal, non-spatial, dimensionless actuality. I didn't call it a reality. Remember, we are discriminating between actualities and realities. And I'm just going to make sure here that my other computer doesn't suddenly shut off. So a non-temporal, it has no time. A point in time has no time. A point in time is a colloquialism. So we say that, to try to make this a little clearer here, okay, a point in time has no time, or contains no time. Let's see, timey, a point in space, why is this so, contains no time, and then a point in space occupies no space or extension. So if a point in space, let's see, PISP, maybe that'd be a good one to do here. PISP, we'll do it this way. All of these little abbreviations may come in handy one fine day, especially when we're discussing this kind of thing. Point in space. It occupies no space. No space or extension. So a point in space has no location, because only a measurability has location. So this is a very interesting idea. When you have a point, is it everywhere? Different ideas begin to come to me as I contemplate this. You know, as you try to live your life, you're presented with that which your perceptual mechanism interprets or transforms from reality into what the presentation is. The presentation to your consciousness, or that which arises as a content in your consciousness, is not the reality. That which arises as a content of consciousness, or a content in your consciousness, is not the reality, or even the reality. When I use just a capital letter at the beginning of the word, I mean in universe, and not the ultimate reality. So where is a point? If it exists and yet has no dimension, can it be placed in any context? That's what I'll kind of ask here, and it may change my conclusions. If a true point, not a virtual point, exists and yet has no dimension, can it be located? Because in a way, relative to each other in extension, only quantifications can be located. Can I call them that? You know, let's see here. Only quantifications can be located. By that I mean, by quantification, I mean perceivables, specifiables, which have quantity in illusion. Well, I think maybe I even did that one once, QIL. Well, that's quantity in illusion, which have quantity in illusion. Okay. So, you know, what we're trying to do here is define the true point. If we place a point, imagine the point is surrounded by things or contents, perceivables with definite quantity, is that really legitimate? A point exists, and yet it occupies no space, and if it's surrounded by those things which apparently occupy space, at least in our perceptual mechanism, can we actually locate that point? We begin to understand that the eternal now, in a way, it's non-local or non-locatable. It cannot be put in context with measurable units of time. Some of these ideas, as I'm thinking here, are maybe a little new to me. They may change what I have to say. So I'm going to put this down here. Can a true point be placed in context with quantifiables? Let's see, QNS, so that's questions. QTS, that's questions too. So I think I will make this as QNS, and I will change it to quantifiables. Quantifiables. Can a true point be placed in any locatable context with quantifiables? And maybe not. We'll have to see what the implications are here. Then I go on with maybe a still more radical statement that a true point is colloquially next to nothing. It's not nothing. It's next to nothing, but nevertheless not nothing, because nothing, in a way, does not exist, except as we name it and thereby sort of thingify it, but it's not actually a reality. It's a concept, but it represents no perceivable whatsoever. And I think, is a point a perceivable? Well, it's not a perceivable in the standard sense, but it's a cognizable. We can cognize the point, maybe we can register the point, register the presence of the point, but not perceive it in extension. So let me put that idea down. Maybe we can register the presence of a true point, but not perceive it in extension. So everything we perceive as if in extension is an illusion, an in-universe illusion, a quantity in illusion, but this point, in a way, it's not. Well, maybe it's the highest form of illusion there is. Every true being, which is sent forth as a ray, as part of the ray that rays forth from the Absolute, is in a way a point. And it's sort of midway between something and nothing. Matter of fact, I have said that somewhere, but I do want to put it down in case I forget to say it. A true point is between something and nothing, or no thing. So we can see, why it's important to ponder a point metaphysically, because basically what I'm going to be saying is that all beings are points. All true beings are points, and any quantifiable, no being is a quantifiable. I'm going to say that no being is a quantifiable. See, so how did I do that? QN, that's quantities, and let's see here. So no being is a quantifiable. A being is a point. A being is a true point. Maybe of a special kind. That's another matter. So a true point is the closest possible thing to nothing, colloquial, a next to nothing, but nevertheless it is not nothing. It is not zero, even though its dimensionality is zero. So a true point is not zero, even though its dimensionality is zero. It exists, but not in extension, but not as a part of extension, which is perceived in illusion. A true point has no dimension and thus occupies no quantity of time or of space. And yet it is. It's what kind of specificity is it? It's can we specify a true? Maybe it's a. Let me call it this. A true point is a non-quantifiable specificity. We can point to it, we can say that it exists, but we cannot measure it. A true point is an unmeasurable or immeasurable, unmeasurable actuality, which is the aperture between zero and a specifiable quantity, including the whole range of infinitesimals. See, so in a way, the true point, the true point cannot be measured as can infinitesimals. Infinitesimals are still quantities. They are still infinitesimals are still quantities. Okay. No, I'm not having much luck there, huh? All right, let's see about that. So, infinitesimals are not nothing, and they are not negligibilities. They are still quantities, and a true point is not a quantity. So I sometimes call the true point the ultimate negligibility. In a way, infinitesimals are negligibilities, but they still have quantity. Infinitesimals are negligibilities with quantity. Infinitesimals are negligibilities with quantity. True points are the ultimate negligibility. I seem to be forgetting how to these code words. So true points then are the ultimate negligibility, or maybe I should put this in plural, even though all ultimate negligibilities are the same. So the ultimate negligibility separated from zero, this is an important point, separated from zero not by any quantity, but by the fact that it exists, whereas zero as nothing does not exist. I guess it's simply, in a way, a thought, but it doesn't represent anything. Zero represents no thing. I think I can put that down, that zero represents no thing. So when we predicate existence of zero, we are thingifying no thing. No thing is not a thing. I mean, we name zero as if it were something, but in fact, it is simply, in a way, a thought which represents no thing at all, whereas a point is a thing. So I'm calling the true points ultimate negligibilities, which are not zero, and not separated from zero by any quantity. They are the reduction of all quantity into an existential. They do exist. It is what happens when what we perceive as extension in time or space is collapsed to the into the ultimately small sum thing. So I call it the ultimate infinitesimal. Though other infinitesimals have quantity, and you can have an infinitude of infinitesimals converging upon the point, still at the place of the point there is a quantity. Well, I can't call it a quantity. I can call it an existential with no quantity. So a true point can be defined as an existential with no quantity. Of course, I realize I'm using adjectives here as nouns, adjectival nouns, but sometimes that seems the clearest thing to do. So another way of considering the true point metaphysically is that the true point is the aperture through which absolute infinitude, as no thing, zero thing, enters the realm of finite quantification, or I should say finite, therefore illusory, quantification. That is the realm of self-objectification, the realm of thinghood, the realm of Maya or measurability. See, my hypothesis is going to be that although we think we have, we can reduce many quantifiable perceivables to points. I'm going to put this down. Hypothesis. That although we can reduce untold number of quantifiable perceivables to true points, yet there is only one true point, now as forever, or now as ever. Only one true point. That all these other measurabilities, which can be reduced to true points, find their way into the one true point, whether it is the one universal point of a particular cosmos or the one and only point, which is the sum of all of the universal points. Maybe I'm going to discuss this shortly. Sometimes I get confused. Have I discussed it previously in this discussion, or is it coming? All measurables ultimately are one point. So all measurables ultimately, after all reductions have been achieved, are but 1 point. And I think I have a name for it here, not the one universal point, but the one and only point. Yes, these descriptions are to come. So a true point is an aperture, is the aperture, and we're going to find out there's really only, I think, finally, one true point, just the way there's only one ultimatized infinitude. That is the aperture through which absolute infinitude as no thing / 0, 0 considered as no thing, but not as nothing. We have to differentiate there between no thing and nothing. It seems like splitting hairs, I suppose. But the no thing is really the nothing would mean that it's nothing at all. But the no thing, if we call it that, describes a ultimatized stateless state in which no thing breaks up the homogeneity of this state, the sameness of it. We're not pretending that it's a complete absence, because it is the source. And, of course, when we think, we can't help but posit. We cannot think of a negation without making it a non-negation. So, we thingify through thinking. But I prefer to think of it as the no thing, that is an ultimatized, absolutely infinite state. Keep on not wanting to use that word, which is characterized by no thing, and yet which strangely has, again, you can't use a word like within, but that, language seems to fail, that in relation to it, within it, etc., all things that ever could be are forever existent, consummated, achieved, so that there's literally nothing new under the sun when we consider this to be the sun being the symbol here of the utter absoluteness. Obviously I'm on the edge here of what language can do, so it's more what language can suggest than what it can denote or specify. So a true point exists but is not quantifiable. So we just have to, in a way, register its presence. Similarly, and I'm saying my view, the ultimate infinitesimal is not quantifiable. I'm saying that. It is the limit of all infinitesimalizing. The ultimate infinitesimal is the limit of all, and this is a process, infinitesimalizing. which is an infinite, ever lessening of quantity. But again, you know, I don't want to say that the limit reached here is nothing at all. I would just say that quantification has disappeared, but existence has not. At this limit, quantification has disappeared, but existence has not disappeared. With zero, as I see it, existence has actually disappeared. Because zero represents that which is not at all. So the process of infinitesimalizing, that's of infinite reduction, which of course, you know, as I tried to stress in my infinitization book, it is not even possible within finite cosmoses, because there are limits to the large and small, according to the will of the Logos presiding. But this process of infinitesimalizing, of infinite reduction, whereby quantities become ever less, thus entering the realm of infinitesimals, converges upon the true point, which is non-quantifiable and not yet zero. This is my hypothesis. Just the way I don't want to call the ultimate infinitude, don't want to call it zero with all caps, because if it was zero, it would be nothing at all. Instead, it's no thing. It, being what it is no thing. Where can I put that? Maybe here. The ultimate infinitude. Maybe that's. I'll just spell it out. Ultimate infinitude. It should not be considered zero as nothing, but zero defined as an it which has within it, I can't use that word, but within it, no thing. So there's a subtle distinction there of zero as nothing at all and zero as the ultimatization which is utterly homogeneous and has within it or exemplifies no thing. Though as the infinitessence, it is forever the source of all possible things. So this process of infinitesimalizing, of infinite reduction, whereby quantities become ever less, thus entering the realm of infinitesimals, converges upon the true point, which is non-quantifiable and yet not zero. if zero is considered as nothing. A point, in a way, is still a thing. Just, well, thing is a poor word, but it's a something. Just the way the ultimate infinitude is. God is. Whereas zero represents is not. So I'm positing an ultimate infinitude, or God, which is. I posit an ultimate infinitude which is. Whereas the normal use of zero indicates that this ultimate infinitude is not. So, I guess maybe the thoughts involved here are getting a little more abstract, but just bear with me here, because all of this, what can I say, has a point. There is a purpose to these thoughts. So the process of infinitesimalizing, or of infinite reduction, of the ever-lessening, whereby quantities become ever less, thus entering into the realm of infinitesimals, converges upon the true point, which is non-quantifiable and yet not zero. It's not a nothing. A point is not a nothing. I guess I just want, for a true point is something, and zero is nothing. So maybe I put it this way: a true point is not a nothing. So we have to be very careful, I think, in our use of the word zero, because sometimes there is kind of a metaphysical assumption that we're talking about absolute infinitude, when really we're talking about that which is characterized by no specifiable thing within it. I don't know how else, what other word to use except within, even though that word is misleading. So this no thing, it's a that. If we call it a that, is it a thing? Well, things usually have more concretion to them. But does a point have concretion, really? When we cannot locate it, and the only thing we can predicate of a point is that it is and has no dimension? Okay, let's just say all that we can predicate of a true point is that it is and has no dimension or measurability. Okay, so this infinitesimalizing, I'm saying, converges upon the ultimate infinitesimal, which is, it is a something, but it's a non-quantifiable something, and it's not nothing. It's not zero, the lower zero. So whether the 1 0 is and yet is no thing is another matter. Well, we cannot think of zero as nothing at all. I mean, if we're going to find the word, this great zero, to the ultimate infinitude by the very fact that we talk about the ultimate infinitude. It's at least of that. It is it is a non-dimensional specifiable, but even more. So at least it's not nothing. So whether the 1-0 is and yet is no thing is another matter. The absolute infinitude is a no thing. But it is also, in a way, a specifiable, the ultimate specifiable. But it's an infinite specifiable. Usually specifiables are finite. We can say the absolute infinitude is the ultimate specifiable, about which we can say nothing, although we seem to be trying. To the nature of the 1-0, the special case of the use of the word zero, this is a special case of the word zero. To that, the term X, as in out of, should never be applied. It means a going forth into exteriority as less than itself. And there is, when the ray rays forth, apparently from the absolute infinitude, there is an X movement, a going out of wholeness, as it were. And it creates actuality and illusion, but it's not essentially real. So when the ray of the absolute goes forth into X-ness, it is the beginning of of actuality in illusion, but this raying forth is not essentially real. Okay, well, that was a little tough. Does it get any easier, I wonder? I guess what I'm trying to say is be careful of the use of the word zero, because it can mean nothing at all. But when we're talking about the ultimate source, it's not nothing, it's no thing. Is that fair enough? The ultimate source is not nothing, but is no thing. And it is, as opposed to being is not. So if I make this very big, it might impress upon us the idea that it is, in distinction to not being. So in the light of the foregoing, well, maybe we can get to some practical idea here. I mean, so far, in summary, what we've said is that there is an ultimate infinitesimal. When you divide any measurable quantity, finite quantity, by the absolute infinitude, you get the ultimate infinitesimal, which is a point. It's a something which exists but has no dimensionality, and that all beings are really points, and that all points, all real points are true points, and all true points are but one true point. I'll say that in a minute. And that the one true point is itself the ultimate infinitesimal, which has no quantification can be predicated. So in light of the foregoing, every universe is a true point, which has paradoxically arisen. Apparently it has arisen because we only understand that from the perspective of actuality in illusion, has arisen apparently and cyclically in absoluteness, infinitessentiality, ultimatization, or has arisen, or maybe we should say in or from absoluteness, infinitessentiality, ultimatization. Every universe is a point. There are some things that we just, regardless of the reasoning that we use to get to these statements, there are certain statements we want to at least fix upon, to be pondered and to be tested. A point has no extension in space or in time. This is going to have a dramatic implication. I think you can begin to see. So in the light of the foregoing, every universe is a true point which has paradoxically arisen. It has apparently arisen. It has cyclically arisen if we consider, from the perspective of time, in or from that, which we are calling absoluteness, infinitessentiality, ultimatization. So that's where the point came from. It came from pointlessness. Now, at least this is how the secret doctrine describes it. The ray flashes forth. The flashing forth of the ray of the Absolute, its entry into X-ness, or, see, X-ness is otherness. It's that which is out of the great homogeneity. So let's look here. The flashing forth of the ray of the Absolute, I'm just going to make this rota. There it is, ray of the Absolute. Okay. The flashing forth of the ray of the Absolute is really entry into X-ness, or otherness, other than the ultimate homogeneity, which is absoluteness and infinitessentiality, ultimatization. So it's radical enough to consider every universe as a point, isn't it? Because we're used to thinking of the vastness of the universe, and here we have this immeasurable non-dimensionality, which is. So we have the universe as an immeasurable, non-dimensionality which is. And that's a very different way of thinking of the universe. It's kind of, this is the penultimate reduction of the universe. Maybe the ultimate reduction of the universe would say, well, there's no universe at all, because only the ultimate infinitude forever exists and everything else is illusion. It's not real. It's an apparency to consciousness. And the real is the irreducible, and there's only one irreducible. We seem to be reducing contents of consciousness to other things, but there is one irreducible. We are contents of consciousness to points, to true points, whereas what should we call it this time? Whereas that is irreducible. And if something is irreducible, it is real. And there's only one thing that's irreducible, and that's how we're defining, in this case, the real, as the ultimate irreducibility. It can never be other than itself. So even when there appear to be other things other than itself, they are always really the irreducibility. So let's just say that all appearances are really the one irreducibility. I think maybe that's one of my 241 names for the nameless, always giving us a different perspective of thought. Well, in relation to all its particular emanations, the true point, we're speaking universally now, or universal point, which is any particular universe, is the one true point, at least in relation to all its emanations. Let's call this universal point the universal true point. Universal true point, and all apparent things in universe, well, I think that's another one we should use, another abbreviation, IU, and we'll call it in universe. So all apparent things in universe are essentially, let's just say, are derived from the universal true point. Now that universal true point we're going to discover is none other than something infinitely greater. All apparent things in the universe are derived from the universal true point. Okay. That means you and I and every other being and every other thing which appears phenomenally to be, even though it may be an aggregation of lesser authentic true points, all those things are this universal true point. It all began in every universe with the universal true point, in time and space. It's as if with the universe we enter the realm of consciousness. And in regard to a universe, we enter the realm of consciousness, which is at the same time the realm of time, space, illusion. When there is no universe, as sometimes there appears not to be, if we perceive all this from the perspective of illusion, then there is no, what was it I just said? Okay. In this universal condition, the condition of universe, there is no consciousness per se. There is only pure being. And pure being is like an extrapolation, an infinite extrapolation of consciousness. I want to say that. The pure being of beingness is an infinite extrapolation of consciousness, certain thoughts come to me that consciousness to the infiniteth degree is being. Oh boy. Is being. To me, consciousness is a great reduction on the infinitized state. So let me be humble here, because what else can you be? Can it be that consciousness is an infinite reduction of the infinitized state of being? I do look at being as absolutely primal, and consciousness entering, as it were, with division, and hence finitization. Consciousness arises with division, with enumeration, with finitization, with otherness. Well, these are thoughts that I did not intend to discuss, but they seem to be arising in my mind as I work through this. Now, I realize that to do this justice, one would have to be very rigorous about this thinking. And basically, I'm being a bit spontaneous. I'm sharing with you what comes to mind when thinking of these issues of the point, of being, of consciousness, of the universe as a point. And as it were, all transpiring within consciousness. I begin to think that there could be no Mahamaya without consciousness. And when Mahamaya, or when consciousness per se disappears, how do you spell that? Disappears, then the universe, as Mahamaya, disappears into being, into ultimate being, that. So, this is a question, and some traditions say, well, ultimate reality is ultimate consciousness. But I do think of a maximalized state. I'll just have to get used to the word state. I don't want to use condition because it's even a more fallible word. An ultimatized state in which being is only in exactly what it is and nothing else, and not even the Trinity exists within it. Not any enumeration whatsoever. When you look at a triangle, it's being, consciousness, action, or maybe Satchit and Ananda is another way of looking at it, but maybe the order's reversed. It's as if the one from which the other two came is all that is, and that consciousness is maximalized into being. So any possibility of apprehending an other is gone. I mean, even apprehending oneself as other, which is really what happens with the arising of consciousness. The split into the perceiver and the perceived, even if the perceiver and the perceived are the same, does not occur in the state of pure being. So the split into the perceiver and the perceived, even if both are the same being essentially, does not occur in the maximalized, well, I should call it infinitized, shouldn't I? Infinitized state. So anyway, maybe coming back, I can't say coming back to Earth, but, we're pretty far out there, or in there, or we have to abandon dualistic language. We have to. I'll just read this again for reorientation. In relation to all its particular emanations, the true point, or universal point, which is any particular universe, is the one true point, at least in relation to its particular emanations. And so we'll call this universal point the universal true point. And let's just say finally that all universes are based upon a universal true point. But there should be an infinity of these. An infinity of these, and a big question is whether this infinity of universal true points is the most problematic question, simultaneous. Simultaneous. They appear to be extended in time, but maybe really they appear to be extended in time, but maybe they are simultaneous in now. You see, I'm not sure at all that I can solve these questions, so I seem to be opening up in some ways infinite cans of worms here. Seem to be opening up problems in philosophy which may be more vexing than the ones I approached in infinitization, and I think there were 200 pages of those problems. Maybe, who knows, it's been a long time. It could be that some of what I'm dealing with here does appear there. I also have a certain faith that many of what appears to be, well, many of what appear to be problems now will simply vanish as the mist when a higher state of consciousness is reached and when the human being becomes a member of a higher kingdom. But I'm kind of allowing myself here to venture into uncharted waters, uncharted for me. Me, this tiny emanated true point, which is one with the universal true point, and maybe, well, I would say one with the one and only true point, which arises when all universal true points are collapsed into one. So it's a bit like, going on an adventure. You don't know where you're going exactly. You know you're going, and you're allowing yourself to think about these things, but maybe you're going nowhere and maybe somewhere. Of course, it might not be bad to go nowhere, given the non-spatiality and dimensionality of reality. So what is here said is true, however, of all apparently cyclically appearing universes. Well, what can we say? I want a new phrase from the perspective of illusion. I want that to be one of my abbreviations, from the perspective of illusion. And from the perspective of illusion. I think I'll capitalize it. Which means, of course, from any other perspective, which means from any other perspective than the perspective, which I don't think there is, of that. In other words, how can we write of these cyclically appearing and disappearing universes, but that's all from within the consciousness, as seen from within the consciousness conditioned by the illusion of time and space. So all that is seen from within the consciousness, which is conditioned by the illusion of time and space. And I think IOTAS, illusion of time and space, I think that's another good abbreviation. Just pause on these. Illusion of time and space. We can meditate on these little code words, time and space. So when consciousness is conditioned by the illusion of time and space, which in the Mahamaya it seems to be, then we perceive the great breath. So when consciousness is conditioned by the illusion of time and space, as it is in Mahamaya, then the great breath is a sequential reality. Oh, yes. But when pure beingness has replaced consciousness, then the resultant state cannot perceive the great breath as a sequential reality. Because we will see that time in which the breath could enact its habitual action does not exist. So I think what's happening here is in these few thoughts, I'm becoming a bit more absolutist than I was able to become with the infinitization book. I think some of these, there were seeds of these thoughts there, but I don't know if I ended in the absolute state or emphasized it so much as that which is utterly illusory and unreal in the sense of being reducible. So, you know, all things other than it are reducible. Only it is irreducible. We seem to be, you know, taking away when we reduce, we take away the actuality of illusion, or we take away its apparent identity, and we reduce it to only that. So we have this universal true point and an infinitude of universal true points, which apparently, from the perspective of illusion, or in the illusion of time and space, we have the production of cyclically appearing universes, or point, no point, point, no point, no point, point, no point, point. But when we start to look at what may be occurring simultaneously, we see that the interval between universes, because they are measurable, have to be ciphers themselves. They have to be, as it were, non-quantities, non-dimensionalities. No dimension of time is involved. So what you can see is that I'm converging on simultaneity here. Now, the simultaneity of everything in the ultimate homogeneity is not practical in terms of dealing with the illusion to which we are forever obliged to deal. I don't imagine ever that this illusion of time-space is going to forever disappear. I think it was Shankaracharya who said that Maya is eternal. It's forever. Maybe forever now. And so is non-Maya. But the big question is, how can non-Maya exist if Maya exists? And that's the paradox. How can non-Maya be if Maya exists? But I guess, you know, I'm dilating, I'm, you know, going off on tangents here, but let's just say that each universe is a universal true point. And all the rest of us and the measurables, let's see, if each universe is a universal true point, then all other measurables are simply true points derived from the universal true point. Okay. Unfortunately, when you do code words, they preserve the color in which they were created. So an attempt will be made to show, or at least to suggest, because I cannot be so bold as to say show, I can only indicate, that all universal true points gathered together, gathering together an infinitude of universal true points are but one ultimate point. And here, in this one ultimate point, I want to make that really big, so as to emphasize it for myself and yourself. They are but one ultimate point. And perhaps, and this is where it really gets dicey, one perpetual ultimate point, meaning an unending, forever ultimate point. Then what happens to the great breath if that is the case? Is the great breath something that doesn't really occur, but occurs under the illusion of time and space? I'm going to, just to preserve the thread here, I've got to, under the illusion of time and space. So I'm going to do it this way, under the illusion of time and space. Because I've been searching for a way of defining the perspective from which any sequence is viewed as real. What I'm saying is that essentially and really sequence is not real, and only simultaneity is real. That all things are occurring at the same time forever, and you can't really call them occurring. It's just the ultimate annihilating, thing-annihilating presence of the ultimate being forever, which I think we have to hold in contradistinction to the apparent flow of events. So an attempt will be made to show, or at least suggest, or indicate that all universal true points gathered together. Now, how do you gather together an infinitude? Well, a number of mathematicians seem to think that it is possible, and they have been contested by those who say, hey, there's no completed infinities. How can you look at an infinitude and handle it as if it were a completed concretion? Maybe it is the case that an infinitude must always remain incomplete, which is one of the reasons that may look backward to you, that it's sometimes drawn, well, it'll look backwards to you, but it's drawn without completing the second loop of the 8 on its side. I can't really draw that here. I suppose if I had the technique I could. But it's an unclosed loop. But maybe that's if we are too impressed by the reality of time, that's when we begin to think about the fact or the idea that infinitudes cannot be completed, because they cannot be completed in time. But can they be, do they exist outside of time? I don't quite have the words there. But, you say, well, you keep counting, you'll never complete it. But, it takes time in which to count. I'm already on 3 billion, quadrillion, sextillion, nonillion, whatever. I'm still counting on and on, and it takes apparent time in which to continue those numbers. And then it looks like infinity can never be completed. But if there is no time, it might be possible to gather an infinitude of objects all together. It stretches the mind to have to think in those terms, the imagination, but I'm assuming that the all of this particular linear infinitude of apparently recurring universal true points can all be gathered into the one ultimate point, which is certainly no bigger than any of the other points, even though it has an infinitude of cipheric universal true points. So all universal true points gathered together are but one ultimate point, and perhaps one perpetual ultimate point if there is no time, which, as it were, contains, because that's dualistic language, this one ultimate point contains the, I want to say, the apparent, illusory differentiations found within, or differentiations of an infinitude of universal true points. In other words, every universe, a universal true point, is producing multitudinous events in consciousness. And somehow this one ultimate point contains all those illusions. Contains, well, okay. So it contains the differentiations of an infinitude of universal true points, along with the differentiations of all lesser true points which have emanated from each universal true point. So we have, let's just say, a huge number of illusory events exists within exists within each universal true point. And all of that huge number collectively, which collectively is infinite, are, quote, contained within the one ultimate, one universal point, or, let's see, maybe it's going to be something different now. It's going to be one ultimate point. One ultimate point. Well, I better, if I don't have a way of writing that, I had better have it. Let's see, we'll do it this way. One ultimate point will be one ultimate point. Okay, I can see that the only way to do this is in the following way. Yeah, I'll do this. One ultimate point. Okay, and then I will make it thus. And we'll see if I can manage to get that one ultimate point into my word recognition. Maybe. Yes, one ultimate point. So all of the infinite variety of apparent events in illusion, illusory events, we can call these by the term or events in illusion, EIL, are contained within this one ultimate point. So, okay, we'll do it this way. EIL, and we'll call this events in illusion. They're all contained within this one ultimate point. Now, I can't get away from the word contained with its suggestion of a finite boundary and other unrealities. But maybe if I use the word inherent, yeah, perhaps I should use the word inherent. In here. Well, I'm just cheating myself, I guess, but perhaps the word inherent or in here would be more suitable. But you can't get away from the idea that our mind is fundamentally conditioned by duality, and that as we conceive the world, we conceive it according to a pair of opposites is revealed by the mind, and complete unity is not its natural type of apprehension. Anyway, so let's go further. In fact, and importantly, all beings are true points and thus have existence, but no spatiality or temporality. So that means that, let's bring it close to home, you and I have no spatiality or temporality. We are not of time and space. So it must be said that non-measurable true points are to be distinguished from virtual points. We've discussed this, which actually are sort of symbolic of the point. Virtual points, I'll put that in here. Virtual points are symbolic of true points, but are not true points. So, no non-measurable true points are to be distinguished from virtual points, which are just kind of symbolic approximations of true points, which actually have dimension and are measurable. And I said, well, you know, the dot of graphite or ink on a page is an immense structure compared to some of the things that are now being measured in the nano realm. So they actually have dimension and are measurable, etc., such as the conventional dot, etc. All representations of true points are in fact virtual points and do not really concern us here. They are just conveniences whereby we can talk about points without really perhaps understanding the deeper and perplexing nature of true points. So, you know, each universe is essentially a universal true point. Now, friends, of course, if I still have any friends left here, all this will have to be studied and pondered, and you may arrive at your own conclusions. I'm simply trying to share with you a process of thinking about things not usually thought about, which can form kind of a background to our everyday process in consciousness with all its many contents, etc., and with which we have forever to deal, apparently. So each universe is essentially a universal true point, and this means that a universe is, and this is a, one of those thoughts that is like counterintuitive, at least runs against what seems to be true. So let's just say that a universe is temporally and spatially non-dimensional. If a point is non-dimensional and all measurabilities are the ultimate infinitesimal, which is really a point, a true point, then a universe, despite its tremendous apparent expanse and tremendous duration, has no space and takes place in no time at all. So it's temporally and spatially non-dimensional. The implications of this may stagger the human mind, for it will cause the collapse of the apparent reality of space-time, space and time. Well, it certainly staggers me, I can tell you that. And of course, that doesn't mean that suddenly I'm going to stop living as if actuality were not actual. Actuality is actual, and Maya is forever, says Shankara, as a great teacher upon what the self is. Even as DK indicated, he said some very interesting ideas coming from Shankara, who I guess followed the Buddha sometime in the BC period. And they've been considered like the two hemispheres of one whole. Sometimes Christ and the Buddha are considered two hemispheres, but within the realm of Eastern philosophy, it's as if the Buddha and Shankara are considered to be two hemispheres. So each universe is essentially a universal true point within, inhering in, inherent in, how do we get rid of that spatial concept? Inhering, dissolving into, in solution with all other, let me try that. Is that fair? In solution with all other universal true points as the one ultimate true point, or the one ultimate true point. I see what I did here. Well, one ultimate true point, one ultimate point. Well, we can keep the letters down to a reasonable size if we just say one ultimate true point. I'm looking for words which are less spatial in their connotation. Whenever you use the word in or out, you pretty well have to deal with this business of location in extension. So, in apparent extension. So, I want not to have to deal with location in apparent extension. But given the language limitations, except for what language can hint at, it doesn't seem that I can avoid the problem. So within, or in hearing or dissolved in solution, in any universe, are all these emanated true points. In solution, maybe we'll just have to deal with that convention. Within any universe, all emanated true points are contained within a particular universal true point. Of course, we cannot use the word contained in a conventional sense. What it really means is that all true points in universe are emanations of a particular universal true point. And note well, and this is the this is the point, are superimposed upon each other within the universal true point. I think, I'm no expert here, but there is a Pauli exclusion principle, which is basically saying that, as I understand it, basically saying that two things cannot occupy the same space. But what I'm saying here, it may be well the case under the illusion of space and time. This may be so under the illusion of time and space, but may not be really so. Because this, the two things are assumed to be different, but what if they're really the same? If two things are the same, can they occupy the same space? Can they be superimposed? So we have to ask, what are the conditions which make such superimposition possible? Okay. And two things which are different cannot be superimposed, but can two dimensional ciphers be superimposed? Things which are and yet are non-dimensional? I'm assuming that they can be, because essentially they are the same thing. So can same occupy the same space and time as same? Maybe I'll put there and capitalize, because we're in universe here. Can space occupy the same? Can same occupy the same space? Can same occupy the same space as same? Well, maybe I have to be a little more cautious here, because only one of these should. This one, same space and time as. Can there be an other same? Well, maybe not. Maybe all sames are identical. All sames are identical, so there cannot be an other, quote, same. Anyway, I'm assuming that superimposition can occur, and that all of these all true points within a universal true point are superimposed. They're not just gathered together as if they have boundaries, but they are basically the same thing. And I carry it further, and I'm going to say that all universal true points can be superimposed upon each other. So whether there are a finite number or an infinitude of true points inhering in, within, dissolved within any particular universal true point, that's a problem to be discussed in mathematical metaphysical philosophy. Whether there's a finite number, in other words, this is difficult, are universes infinite or finite? Well, essentially they have to be infinite, because But in actuality, they have to be finite, because they appear and disappear in time. So I'm saying that the answer depends on the concept of authentic beings developed in infinitization of selfhood. I'm saying there are only a finite number of authentic beings in in any cosmos, and that this finite number, all other things that occur to consciousness are not really authentic beings, but they are measurables, apparently measurables. Some of the apparent measurables are authentic beings, and some are simply the phenomena that arise when congeries of authentic beings seem to create forms other than the form of an authentic being. I'm not so sure it's all that important to discuss this matter. I think I discussed it fairly much in finitization. My tendency is to think that a finitude of true points within any particular, to think of a finitude of true points within any particular universal true point, thus preserving the finitude of the universe. See, the important thing here is we have to, I think, preserve the finitude of any particular universe. And I give different arguments for that. You know that if universes are, let's say, developmental, and we progress from universe to universe, then every universe is infinitely evolved, which is a contradiction. What is an infinitely evolved universe? It's a universe that has actually become the absolute. And I never thought of that before, but an infinitely evolved universe is a universe which has become the absolute, which it essentially is anyway. But we know that in time and space, and under the illusion of time and space, universes are not infinitely evolved. They are circumscribed. And, you know, just as the absolute infinitude cannot appear and disappear, so an infinitely evolved universe, which would be the absolute, cannot appear and disappear. And that for me is a new thought and requiring work. Requiring work. But it's interesting, you know, as I'm thinking of things here with you, other thoughts come to my mind. They may be a little bit, what can I say, a little rough, and I'm just taking the risk of roughness here in order to make this in a more conversational style. One day, all of this that I'm saying, any worthwhile parts of it, can be systematized, as I attempted in Blue mostly to systematize, but I discover that spontaneously other thoughts are occurring which kind of break the systematization that I attempted. But let's just say whether, you know, is there an infinitude of measurabilities in any universal true point? At the moment, without being able to think through it entirely, I'm opting to say that it's a finitude and not an infinitude of measurabilities, no matter how great the number of apparent quantities might be. Of course, I can see I can see. See, the thing is that in the mind there's an infinitude of measurabilities. But in terms of the actual laws of a particular universe, those laws do not allow for infinitely small quantities. The mind allows for them, but the laws of the universe apparently do not. So I talked about that as simply the will of God or the will of the universal logos to keep things within due bounds. Of course, if you have, an infinity of simultaneous finite universes, do you have an infinite ongoing universe? I mean, it gets more and more demanding as we go, and I'm seeing new areas which have to be thought through. Always new horizons are coming up. I'm reminded of what Alice Bailey said when she was taking dictation from the Tibetan. So many things that he did say raised the vista of amazing possibilities that he did not mention. So you can only, put down so much. And as I begin to think about this, if all universes with their illusions are occurring simultaneously, do you in a way have one infinite universe? Well, I'm going to have to leave that for another, quote, time, because it would lead me off into a speculation which maybe would be far beyond any capacity that I have to say something of value about. We do know that under the illusion of time and space, universes seem sequential. At least if we take the second fundamental of the secret doctrine, we say, okay, that fundamental is an expression of the truth, but that is under the illusion of time and space. If we're not under the illusion of time and space, because, after all, if you're going to have the great breath, right there is time in the creation of space. But if you're going to talk about that sequence under the, within the truth of reality, then maybe the sequence is destroyed, and then you have the fact that you have all these universes with all of these events in consciousness occurring within them. So are there an infinite number of events in consciousness occurring simultaneously forever? I have raised new problems for myself and maybe for others, if they care to get into it. There are problems here. The whole idea of the homogeneous, the ultimate homogeneity, and yet all of the infinitude of appearances and contents of consciousness which arise when you look at the collection of infinitude of universes which have to be occurring simultaneously. If any specific quantifiable duration, quantity of time, is dimensionless in time and dimensionless in space. So, we have sequential universes, and that's how the secret doctrine presents it, and then we have superimposed universes with their immense variety, each one of them all occurring simultaneously with all that could ever occur within them, already forever consummated within the absoluteness. Well, you know, that's about as far out as I've been able to go ever, and I don't know what kind of resolution we can have with that. I'll simply continue with what I was discussing. Another way of describing the relationship between the many emanated true points in any one universal true point, or a universe, is to say that all beings in universe are essentially identical with the essence of their universal true point source and with each other. Well, I think, you know, some ideas which looked difficult before begin, when compared with other speculations, to look simpler. And I might say that this is the case here. That all beings in universe are essentially identical with the essence of their particular universal true point. Remember, there may only be one, ultimately. One ultimate true point. That all beings in universe, in any particular universe, are essentially identical, not identical in appearance, because that's what Maya does. It creates difference. Are essentially identical with the essence of their universal true point source and with each other. So this is pantheism. You know, God is one, the universe is one, all that one sees is identical. So we would say this means the identicality of all that is perceivable in universe. More conventionally, this identicality is referred to as the one life of any particular universe. We are all, from that point of view, the universal logos. But then the universal logos is every other universal logos, and all universal logoi are that. See, I'm not quite content just to say, well, look, it's all that, because the Mahamayavic process is forever. And in a way, it's just as much the real as the homogeneous real. That's the thing. It's a veil upon the real, because it's particulated. In other words, the contents of our consciousness are distinct. We're not forever perceiving homogeneity. You know, we can't shut our eyes to variety. So the multiplicity veils homogeneity, and we're doomed or treated to an endlessness of apparent multiplicity. So it is problematic. We convince ourselves of the ultimate homogeneity, and yet have an ultimate infinitude of simultaneous multiplicity. Let's see if that is correct. You know, is there an infinite simultaneous multiplicity under the illusion of time and space? Or let's just say, maybe I should just say, under the spell of illusion. I like that one, because I don't have to always be specifying time and space. Under the spell of illusion. So, under the spell of illusion. Okay. Now I realize that this program seems to be going on forever, but given my apparent circumstances and, if I can joke about it, time limitations, I think it's easier for you to download this and then just stop when you want to and then resume it later if you wish, than it is for me to keep dividing up these programs. So the following I'm saying may require the exercise of the imagination. It is hypothesized that there is no... All right, here comes my so-called proof, which you've probably already been able to intuit. The following may require the exercise of the imagination. It is hypothesized that there is no space between true points in any particular universe, and also that all true points in any particular universe are not temporally separated, essentially. So I'm hypothesizing here that there is no separation between true points in any universe, and we are all true points. It's just what the intuition of the sages, mystics, occultists has said. There's just no separation, you know. This is another way of stating that the great heresy of separateness prevails and misleads us into thinking that separation is real. And so I'm saying that there's no temporal or spatial separation between true points in a universe. So if there's no spatial separation, we are all the same thing. And if there is no temporal separation, everything we do takes place at the same time, apparently. I always have to add that because we are under the spell of illusion. Okay, under the spell of illusion. So we're in this world in which the many contents of consciousness all seem differentiated, moving in their own directions, quite distinct, and yet we're saying that there is no separation between true points because they occupy no space at all, and every one of us is the true point. This takes us up onto the higher planes, of course, doesn't deal with the plane of appearances. And that there's no temporal distinction between our many actions. It's all apparently not happening simultaneously, and yet essentially whatever is happening in non-durationality. How can you have happening in non-durationality? Well, that's our paradox. Another way of understanding this is that all the beings in universe are essentially superimposed. Though perceptually distinct, as actualities in consciousness in apparent time and space. Well, you know, maybe at this point you're willing to say, thank goodness for actuality. At least it gives us the world that we're accustomed to and that we think we can deal with or manage in some sense. What would we do if there was only reality? Which is a bit like saying, what would God do if there was never aught other than God? Lonely position. Believe it or not, that kind of explanation was used in one of these channelings that came through Dr. Anna Kingsford. And of course it was actually serious. It wasn't making a bit of a joke of it. So all of us beings here, from the tiniest atom to the greatest logos or person of the universal trinity, whatever, to the universal logos himself, are superimposed temporally and spatially. And so all the beings in universe are superimposed temporally and spatially. Well, we can, we go along and say, well, there is no real space, we're all connected, so everything's all here, and everything's happening at the same time. That's harder. I've always found time harder than space. Maybe it's just the way my psyche and mind are constructed. It seems harder to break the spell of time than to break the spell of space, because we can somehow imagine that all things are here. There's only here, and even our telecommunications systems are showing us that in a way there is no there. We're always in each other's presence. While we are always in each other's presence, are we all in each other's presence at the same time? Always? That's harder. It's much harder. I mean, for me anyway, it's much easier to collapse space than to collapse time. Maybe somebody can come to me with a good method that can be adopted by the psyche for the collapsing of time, the experiential collapsing of time. I think the experiential collapsing of space is closer and is actually being done. But of course, many can meet in different spaces, apparently different spaces, at the same time. But while they're meeting, time continues to go on, apparently, while space between them is overcome. This business of collapsing illusion into penultimate reality, I'm going to call it that. Okay. We have to learn to collapse illusion into penultimate reality. And by penultimate reality, I mean penultimate means that which occurs just before the ultimate. So the one universal true point is the one penultimate reality. The one universal true point, the one penultimate reality. In other words, it's the one universal true point is the closest thing, those words, to being reality other than reality itself. And of course, the one ultimate true point is reality, but doesn't seem to be. Like every universe is essentially reality, but doesn't seem to be because its particularity veils it. See, the particularity of finite things veils the fact that each finite thing is really the real. That seems worth studying. So another way of saying this is that finitudes veil absolute infinity or infinitude. So we're dealing with all of these distinct finitudes, and they are really the veil upon their own essential absolute infinitude. What I'm thinking is, as I talk about these things, I don't know if anyone will have the courage or the time or the will to edit any of this, but one day if it ever should be edited, maybe certain points that seem of value should be taken out and put into their own sort of list. I mean, some may wish to listen to this in its entirety, but others may want to get, if there are any pearls, that they should be extracted and listed together. My only fear is that the continuity of how they evolved would not be readily apparent. So anyway, the superimposition of all beings in cosmos, in universe, and so essentially every being in universe is every other being in universe. And more conventionally stated, life is one and being is one. Okay, fine. Now, also an attempt will be made to suggest that all universal true points are also superimposed and form one ultimate true point. One ultimate true point. It's like, there's all the many are the one. And even the one is the no thing. So all universal true points are superimposed and form one ultimate true point, and thus every universal true point is every other universal true point, and combine to form one ultimate true point, which perhaps forever is. See, if we eliminate the sequence in which universes emerge, if we are in any way justified in doing that, then we have this superimposition in time. So there is no removal in time of universal true points. They just form one universal ultimate true point at the same time. One ultimate. Have I been saying universal? I meant to say one ultimate true point. The many infinite number of universal true points form one ultimate true point. And there is no temporal span between them, so it's as if it doesn't disappear. It's as if there's no time. This is the question. Is there then no time in which a universal true point can appear or disappear? If a universal true point is, let's just say, if the one ultimate true point is because universal true points are, then perhaps the isness of the one ultimate true point is forever. Now, I really don't like to propose that, because in some ways it seems illogical. But if you eliminate the time for appearance and disappearance, then you cannot have that cycle. You cannot have an interval, a measurable interval, in which the universal true point is not. So no measurable interval in which a universal true point is not is then possible, because the time in which a universal true point would not be is also a cipher. A non-dimensional is non-durational. I guess all of this is really pointing to the absolute synthesis of the absolute. So all this points to the absolute synthesis of the absoluteness of the absolute. The absolute, immovable, indescribable homogeneity of the absolute. It's a greater perfection in universe that the stage of infinitessence always be now than that it be now and then. The continuity of infinitessence would make possible the absolute perfection of the absolute. So I'll say that. The continuity of infinitessence would make possible the absolute perfection of the absolute. Otherwise, we seem to be face to face with imperfection, but of course imperfection is a seeming that we will ever have to deal with. The Mahamaya is forever, and it is imperfect. So imperfection is forever, and I've given a justification for that, but essentially imperfection is not. The cyclic appearance of imperfection is a seeming which occurs forever under the spell of time and space. But essentially, perfection always is, and imperfection, well, even if we take away its cyclicity and say imperfection always is, essentially underneath the apparent imperfection is the absolute perfection, and so imperfection is not, though it seems to be. Of course, we have to live in this seeming, and we call it reality, but it's good to have an idea of what reality is, other than what we normally think it to be. So a hypothesis may perhaps be advanced that the one ultimate true point may be sustained without interruption in the now as forever, now as ever. Well, that's what I've been hinting at here. And now it's just a statement, and I didn't emphasize this really at all in my infinitization book. I emphasized sequence far more than simultaneity, though I spoke of the simultaneity but did not follow out its implications. So the one ultimate true point may be sustained, even though in a way it is an illusion, or occupying the middle ground between reality and illusion, but still anything other than reality is illusion, may be sustained without interruption forever, in the now as forever, now as ever. The implications of this possibility are far more radical than that which has been advanced in the philosophy of radical infinitism. Well, just like what happened with Galileo, he discovered, God is not really comprehensible by man when he had his concentric circles and saw that there was an apparently greater infinitude of radii than the infinitude of radii he had created or hypothesized for the smaller circle, and on and on and on. So, that's what I mean by absolute infinitude. There are degrees of infinitude, which again may seem counterintuitive, but some of the mathematicians, of course, they have spent years developing these degrees of infinitude. You kind of wonder whether it doesn't just reflect the processes of mind. I mean, here we are, stuck within our mechanism such as it is, and maybe so much of what we speculate upon is just the reflection of the structure of this particular mechanism. Well, anyway, probably from all of this will emerge really just a few main points, among them that a point has no dimension, and that every universe is a point and thus has no dimension, and that all the collection of universes together is one ultimate true point with no dimension, but existence, but no dimension, and that all dimensions are in illusion. In illusion. Dimensionality is an illusion. I want to say that. DII. Okay, we'll see what that comes up with here. I'll say this, that is illusion. Dimensionality is illusion. Now, obviously, we're learning all about this and have to. All about these, we have to really live in the illusion. You sometimes wonder whether simultaneously we are not also infinite essentially being exactly what we are, even while living in illusion. Or is there truly the alternation? Certainly there's the seeming alternation when under the spell of illusion, under the spell of space and time. It's really hard to escape duality. I think experientially we can escape it. But when we want to, and we can know that Brahman and samsara are one, and we can sense that it's all one thing and all here now. But when you start to think about these things, well, assuming the mind is not that which simply leads us into illusion, but when you start to think about these things, duality presents itself when we consider the mechanism of accomplishment of the appearance of universes, or of simply the existence of the universe, when compared to the absolutely ultimate. We just have to make that hypothesis that the universe is not the absolutely ultimate, and yet is. Because the absolutely ultimate is indivisible, and there is naught else but the absolutely ultimate, and whatever presents itself to us can only be the irreducible that. Well, anyway, a hypothesis may be advanced, perhaps, that the one ultimate true point may be sustained without interruption in the now as forever, now as ever. Forever. I mean, it's forever. Like there's always... Well, what we're asking here, has there always been illusion without interruption? Or, according to the great breath, no, not the great bear, great breath, and I've capitalized this, is the appearance of illusion cyclic. But this cyclicity requires that time be real. And is it? Okay, well, that's what I've been trying to point out, that time is an apparency and is not really real. The implications of this possibility are far more radical. Yes, they are more radical than what I have chosen to emphasize in the philosophy, not philosophical, philosophy of radical infinitism, which means, just getting to the root of everything, is what radical infinitism is all about. So let us attend to this reasoning, because the true point has no dimension, whether of time or of space. And this, I think, we have tried to establish, though it's a very hard concept, because when we think of a point, we think of something we can imagine. You can't really imagine a point. You can only imagine a virtual point. Because the minute you imagine it, you've given it extension. And extension is dimension. And points are, by definition, dimensionless. So let us attend to this reasoning. Because the true point has no dimension, whether of time or of space, it has no spatial extension or location, and no temporal duration. We could say, and I think I want to say it, that one can imagine only a virtual point and not a true point. Spatial locations in extension and temporal durations are only apparencies or illusions in consciousness, we can say apprehended under the spell of illusion. Well, some really radical things are being said here, because, we're just about ready to get rid of extension and time. And of course, if that state of consciousness comes upon you, in which time and extension disappear, it's not that everything before your eyes is going to disappear. It's just a whole different way of understanding and perceiving. The illusion remains apparent and is seen as unreal. Well, now and then we do want to have those states of apprehension which are radically different from what we usually experience. We want to have those as the necessary dualistic contrast with our everyday reality, which is only apparency. We don't want to be deluded by apparency. So because the true point has no dimension, whether of time or of space, it has no spatial extension. And you cannot imagine something without space. Just try. What is the thing without spatial extension? If you imagine a point, you see a little dot, right? There's spatial extension there. There's no spatial extension or location. That's really a rough one. The non-locatability of the true point. Then is it everywhere? The non-locatability of the true point. If a true point exists and it cannot be located in the context of dimensional measurabilities, where is it? Is there any where? Well, and this could be really problematic. Can any where or any when be assigned to a true point. Well, where does the universe occur? It just occurs. You can't measure it against you can't locate it against the background of no thingness. It just occurs. When does it occur? Well, you could say, well, after the previous universe and before the succeeding universe, but what if they're all superimposed? It always occurs. So I'm going to have to deal with that at some point, you know. It seems that there are two simultaneous realities occurring here, and that they both appear to be true, but I think one is far more true, infinitely more true than the other. But, you know, when you have to deal with an actuality forever, now, you have to take it seriously. So anyway, moving on here, we remember that every specifiable quantity, or should we say specifiable, maybe we should say it is finite and measurable, potentially measurable, if the right instrument were there, is an ultimate infinitesimal. And the true point is the ultimate infinitesimal. We are faced before us by reducible measurabilities, infinitudes, and finitudes, which are ultimate finitesimals. So we are constantly faced with reducible finitudes and measurabilities, which are, in fact, ultimate infinitesimals. So in a way, all contents of consciousness, if measurable, are ultimate infinitesimals. But, you know, there's different ways to measure. You don't just need a ruler. I mean, you can measure in terms of time. You can measure in terms of frequency. It's almost as if everything in the Mahamaya, let's just call it the Mahamaya, and everything within it Mahamaya is measurable. Is a thought measurable? Well, I think that once we discover the true dynamics of thought and ideation, we will find that, you know, though it's not measurable with a ruler, it is in some way has degrees of intensity and degrees of scope and so forth. Measurability is more subtle than just talking about length, width, and breadth. Frequencies are to be involved here, but perhaps frequencies too do have speeds of appearance in time and space. They have oscillation. They have the maybe the measurability of the movement of the apparent item involved. The oscillating factor can be measured. Anyway, measurability is far more subtle than we normally think of it, but we're not going to get into all those technicalities. We're going to say that in the Mahamaya itself, when viewed from the point of view of actuality, okay, and everything within it, when viewed under the spell of illusion, is measurable. The pointness of the Mahamaya is not measurable. The pointness of the Mahamaya is not measurable, because it is, see, only under the spell of illusion are things measurable. What the Mahamaya produces, let's see, the Mahamaya is produced by the immeasurable point. The Mahamaya is produced by the immeasurable, universal true point. So there is what's experienced within the Mahamaya, and then there is, of course, the universal true point itself, which let's just say well, this is a bold statement, all true points are intermediaries between no thing and thing. Now that's something I will really have to explore. Some of these things came up later in the writing of infinitization, and I never really had a full chance to explore them. So, in fact, every true point is, in magnitude, the ultimate infinitesimal, and all ultimate infinitesimals are equal. They are, there's only one thing that is and has no dimensionality to it. Let's call it one specificity. One specificity which is and has no dimensionality. And that is the universal ultimate infinitesimal. Okay. Whether we are comparing the tiny beings as true points, universal true points, let's just say universes as universal true points, or the one ultimate true point, all equal. And that, of course, is quite a statement, because you look at scope, magnitude, vastness, tininess, and say, this way, all apparent sizes are equal, all apparent durations are equal in being in being, in a sense, zero. They are not the zero, but they have zero dimensionality. So there's zero extension and zero duration, and yet they exist. That's the one thing that cannot be taken away from the true point, its existence. You can remove extension, you can remove duration, but you can't remove the existence of the true point. Existence. There's no instance, existence of the true point, because it's other, apparently other, than the ultimate homogeneity, the pointlessness. So it's apparently gone out from and become other than the ultimate homogeneity, but it is. Well, at least it is in illusion. It has no fundamental extension or duration. Well, then how do you place it in time? But just the way you can't place a universe in space. There's nothing else than it. Where is a universe? The universe just is. There's no, it's nowhere, and it's occurring, we're going to say, at no time. Time is relative, and when you say it occurs after this one and before that one, okay, except when they're superimposed. In relation to what time can you say a universe exists? It occurs out of time, when relativity is not considered. So if we add all the ultimate infinitesimals together, the result will be the ultimate infinitesimal, with non-dimensionality, non-extensibility, non-durationality. That's what we will have. If we add all the ultimate infinitesimals together, the result will be the ultimate infinitesimal, because while ultimate infinitesimals do exist, their dimensionality is 0. Now, this is their, I guess, their, well, dimensionality is an actuality anyway. We can't talk about true dimensionality. There is no true dimensionality. There is only actual dimensionality. So, are you still with me? Am I with myself? You see, this is simply an attempt, because you know how it is. If you have a book and you write things now and then, it never can take form in any systematic manner. So this is an unsystematic attempt to be systematic and to lay down in a semi-cohesive fashion thoughts, ideas, which are extensions of earlier ideas I've had, and which have grown out of seeds of earlier ideas, and which are, relatively to me, new ideas that may confound the earlier ones, but they are coming to me, and I want to at least get them down so someone can look at this and see if it speaks to him or to her, and see if it alters the view, the consciousness, really. You can't alter being. That's principle. Being cannot be altered. But consciousness can. And that's where we're at work. To alter the sensitivity, the inclusiveness, the depth of our consciousness. Being remains what it is. It's a bit like the first and second fundamental. The first fundamental is fundamental. And the second fundamental is actually based upon alteration, change, mutation. So from the perspective of consciousness in illusion, or under the spell of illusion, or under the spell of time and space, a universe seems to endure. For a specifiable, i.e. Measurable, quantity of time, the interval between universes seems to endure for a specifiable, measurable quantity of time. The secret doctrine suggests this. The eternal parent slumbered for 7 eternities. Note the specific quantification. Time is involved when measuring what the eternal parent does, and it does it in time and in the conventional understanding of eternal duration, foreverness, on and on and on. On and on and on of what? But, okay, so this is the seeming. The seeming is that the universe lasts, endures, takes time. Well, I want to say this before I forget it, that the... Oh, sorry. Oh, let's get that right. The eternal now, it should be in caps, right? You know, the eternal now takes no time at all, ever. But even by saying ever, I seem to imply that time exists. But the eternal now takes no time. It does not move. It's immovable. Immovable time. Immovable time is perhaps simultaneity. Perhaps so. But all specifiable quantities of time, when I say specifiable, maybe what I'm really meaning is measurable, quantities of time are, when taking our indeterminate methods, when divided by absolute infinitude, the same. Now, that may seem counterintuitive as well, but I assume there is no greater quantity. Say we divide 5 by absolute infinitude or divide 2 by absolute infinitude, the quotient is the same. Namely, the ultimate infinitesimal, which is none other than the true point, a non-temporal, non-spatial something, which is not nothing. Oh, my. Do we want to think of that? The true point. A non-temporal, non-spatial something which is not nothing. So what I'm saying here is that the dimensionality of all true points is exactly the same, 0. And yet, unlike the 0, as a, well, I don't want to say a no thing, I want to say a nothing. As a nothing, the true points exist. I'm saying that 0 is a nothing. Of course, we have a word and a concept we call 0, but the essence of 0 is nothing. It's very useful in mathematics and for mathematical operations, but it indicates that there's nothing there. Now remember that the 0, the bold case 0, I would use it in a special way with relation to absolute infinity. I would call it the no thing. But not nothing. And here I'm saying that true points, any true point, is not a nothing. It's a something. So, from one perspective, there is only one true point ever. From one perspective. Now, is this the true perspective? You know, a true perspective. I'm not sure. I know, you know, that in the case of Albert Einstein, he was loath to accept many of the conclusions of quantum mechanics. He, what does he say? Subtle is the Lord, but malicious he is not, or God does not play dice with creation of the universe, something of that nature. He had this fixed thought which did not allow him to embrace what other physicists, advanced physicists, were coming up with. So I'll just say from one perspective, and I don't know if this perspective is true, because I would have to give up sequence. I would have to give up the appearing and disappearing universe, and I have to say that it occurs only under the spell of illusion, but not really. Am I willing to do that? So from one perspective, there is only one true point ever. Only one true point ever. Only one true point ever, and all the infinitude of true points are exactly the only one true point, and I am speaking here of what is called the one ultimate true point, which is the combination of all universal true points and all of the many true points within each universal true point. So the sum of all true points within an infinitude of universal true points. That's what we're speaking of here. Now, at first these just seem like mental concepts, but when you start to think that they purport to speak about the very substance of life, about what we consider to be real. So allow these abstractions, understanding that they are meant to explain more deeply a truer nature of what we take for realities. Now, what I'm going to say here is this is the end. End of simultaneity and sequence number 4, 3 hours approximately. This is Valentine's Day. What a thing to be talking about on Valentine's Day, or what a no thing to be talking about. And then before long we'll have the beginning of simultaneity and sequence. Number 5. So, just to get back to Earth, what I'd like to do is all together. Oh, that's wrong. This is correct. To do the great invocation. Because after all, in this world of actuality, in which we seem to live forever, even though now as forever might negate that foreverness, really, we have the seeming to live. All is illusion, O dweller in the shadows. So we have to improve the illusion, perfect the illusion, archetypalize the illusion, and the most important thing in our particular little corner of the great illusion, the earth, is the coming of the Christ and the reappearance, the externalization of the hierarchy. So, maybe, yes, I have my pitch pipe handy, and today I have not used my voice so much that I can't sing the note G. Maybe I can. Second rate note. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men, let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men, may Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends, we have another 50 or so points to go, but I'm imagining that within, well, 144, that's an important that's an important number. Another 60 points to go. I'm imagining another few hours ought to do it, because we have the fundamentals, really, that what we are experiencing is the contents of our own consciousness. As the Absolute become universal logos, become universal true point, become one ultimate true point. That's what we're experiencing. And it's one experience for all of us, eventually to be realized. So, that will be all for the moment. I know it's a long program, but okay, it seems that this must be the way to do it for the moment. See you soon. Bye-bye.